In the grimdark universe, where gods war through their chosen sons, and the galaxy burns in eternal conflict. To embark upon this blood-drenched journey through the Primarchs is to peer into the souls of demigods, genetically forged warlords, each a paragon of might and a slave to their fatal flaw. These are not mere heroes or villains. They are legends, destined for greatness or ruin. Let's dive into their powers, their damning weaknesses, and the dark moments when those very flaws were turned against them. Leman Russ, the first Primarch. In the shadowed annals of the Imperium's darkest tomes, one name stands tall, wrapped in secrecy, forged in twilight. Leman Russ, the first, the Watcher in the dark. He was the Emperor's inaugural sonborn, amidst the warp-storm-shrouded world of Caliban, a planet of beasts and ancient secrets. A child raised in forests older than light, shaped by the hunt, by war, by isolation. When the Emperor found him, the lion already bore a warrior's soul and a knight's pride. As a strategist, he was without equal. Where others charged, he calculated. Where others faltered, he adapted. The lion saw the battlefield not as terrain, but as a living organism. He hunted his prey across stars with surgical precision. And when blades crossed, he stood unmatched, a master duelist whose sword sang with fatal poetry. But, like all the Emperor's sons, the lion carried a flaw as deep as the void itself. Distrust. A mind armored not just in logic, but in suspicion. Even among his brothers, he kept his secrets locked away like relics in a vault. None could truly know the lion for. Even he questioned the loyalty of blood. And in the crucible of the Horus Heresy, that flaw cost the Imperium dearly. When the galaxy burned and brother turned on brother, Leman Russ did not march with open arms to Guilliman's banners, nor did he ride to the side of Jaghatai Khan. Instead, he chose silence, solitude. His loyalty was certain, but his allegiance was cloaked. Every move he made, every whisper he heard, was filtered through suspicion. Friends became pawns, allies became suspects. As terror bled, the dark angels lingered in the shadows of the conflict, isolated by their Primarch's cold logic. Opportunities to strike decisive blows were lost, unity was shattered, and the fires of rebellion burned brighter. Some say that had the lion marched with Guilliman, the heresy's tide may have been turned. Others believe his secrecy was a shield, guarding secrets too dark for the Imperium to bear. But one truth remains. The lion did not fall, but he did not rise with his brothers. Now, 10,000 years later, he returns in the time of ending awoken from deep slumber, a blade in hand and judgment in his heart. But even now, the question echoes in the void. Can a man who trusts no one save everyone? Fulgrim, the fallen Phoenician. He was sculpted from the Emperor's own vision of perfection, a warrior without flaw, a prince among monsters. Fulgrim, the Phoenician, the Lord of Perfection. His was a beauty that could silence a battlefield. His blade sang through air like a divine instrument. His words could stir hearts, break wills, or command legions to die with smiles on their faces. Among all the Primarchs, Fulgrim was the most refined, the most magnificent. To him, war was not just duty, it was art. Every strike, every motion, every campaign was a masterpiece. And he, its flawless conductor. But perfection is a double-edged sword, and Fulgrim craved it. He pursued it in every detail, in the curve of a blade, the harmony of a choir, the architecture of bloodshed. But perfection is a lie, and obsession with it, a trap. In the halls of the lair, Fulgrim found a sword unlike any other, a blade that spoke, not with sound, but with promise. It whispered of beauty beyond mortal comprehension, of pleasures unspoken, of a world where he would not need to strive for perfection, because he was perfection. That was the beginning. The noble Phoenician began to change, first in manner, then in body. His once noble quest for perfection twisted into hedonistic obsession. Art turned to excess, pride turned to blasphemy. And the Emperor's golden sun became a daemon's vessel. The blade of Lair, imbued with the taint of Slanesh, used Fulgrim's greatest strength, his artistry, his vanity, as the blade that cut his soul in half. He became a hollow cathedral for the Dark Prince, a creature of silken horror and decadent apocalypse. In his moment of final fall, Fulgrim did not scream. He laughed, because to him this was not corruption, it was evolution. Even now, 10 millennia later, he drifts in the Imperium, demon prince of excess, skin like marble, eyes like daggers, dipped in delight. His laughter echoes in the minds of artists, killers, and madmen alike. He was the most beautiful of the Emperor's sons, and the first to fall utterly to chaos. Perturabo, the Lord of Iron. He was never the favored son, never the shining hero. But when the Imperium needed its most brutal wars won, they sent Perturabo, the Lord of Iron, Primarch of the Iron Warriors, master of siege and steel. Perturabo's genius was not poetic. It was mechanical. He saw worlds not as homes or sanctuaries, but as structures to be broken. He did not inspire loyalty through words or nobility. He commanded through precision, through cold mathematics of war. No wall could withstand him. No defense could endure. Siege warfare was not his specialty. It was his art. But behind that iron intellect lay a heart corroded by bitterness. While his brothers bathed in glory, Perturabo was given the thankless tasks, the long, grinding campaigns, the attrition wars that cost thousands of lives. He carried out the Emperor's will without complaint at first. But resentment grew toward his brothers, toward the Imperium, toward a father who only acknowledged the victories of others. When rebellion tore the galaxy asunder, Perturabo turned traitor, not in a fit of madness or lust for power, but in calculated response to decades of neglect. He joined Horus, wielding his bitterness as a weapon. When his own homeworld of Olympia rebelled, questioning his rule, he responded with finality. He unleashed the full fury of his legion, raising the world into dust. Not as an act of necessity, but as punishment. A brutal reminder that Perturabo had buried his last illusion of mercy. In the aftermath, he became a figure of dread across the stars. He led the Iron Warriors in the Iron Cage, a bitter siege against Dorn's imperial fists that bled both legions dry. Later, the powers of the warp rewarded his devotion with demonhood, a being no longer bound by flesh, but by eternal function. He was never the Golden Sun, never beloved, never praised. But he endures, not through glory, but through destruction. Jaghatai Khan, the great Khan. He was the storm that rode on white thunder, the hunter whose blade sang before his enemies ever saw his face. To the Imperium, he was a mystery. To his foes, a phantom. Jaghatai Khan, Primarch of the White Scars. The Great Khan, born beneath alien stars and shaped by the harsh freedom of Chogoris, The Khan embodied speed, independence, and the thrill of the hunt. While his brothers built fortresses or debated strategy, Jaghatai moved with blinding precision and lethal momentum. He didn't fight wars. He unleashed them like lightning across the void. His warriors struck like ghosts, vanishing before the enemy could blink, only to reappear where the line was weakest. His guerrilla tactics, his mobile warfare, his impeccable sense of timing, these were unmatched in all the Emperor's legions. But for all his power, Jaghatai bore a fatal flaw. He would not be caged, not by hierarchy, not by politics, not even by his own brothers. He answered to no throne but his own. And in that fierce independence, he stood apart. When the heresy erupted, the Khan hesitated. Not out of fear, never that, but because he would not be used, he would not be ordered. His aloofness kept the white scars on the periphery of the conflict, watching, weighing, deciding. While others bled for their causes, Jaghatai rode the line between loyalty and autonomy. It was only when the heresy threatened to engulf Chogoris itself that he struck, with all the fury and grace of the storm he embodied. By then, precious time had been lost. Worlds had fallen. Alliances were shattered. His independence, his refusal to bend, had allowed the traitors space to spread their lies, to tighten their grip. Still, when he chose his side, there was no hesitation. The white scars became a blur of fury, carving through traitor lines, harrying retreating forces, striking where none expected. He didn't play their game. He tore up the board. Even now, his fate is a legend. Some say he vanished into the webway, forever chasing the enemies of mankind. Others claim he hunts the dark Eldar, a lone specter in the infinite dark. But one truth remains. Where freedom lives, so rides the Khan. Leman Russ, the Wolf King. He was the Emperor's executioner, the fanged spear in the dark. Not a warrior, but a predator. Leman Russ, Primarch of the Space Wolves. The Wolf King of Fenris. From the death world of Fenris, Russ was raised by wolves and never truly left their pack. He fought like a beast, ruled like a warlord, and lived by loyalty, honor, and the hunt. His legion howled through the void, a storm of fangs and fury unleashed upon the enemies of mankind. In battle, there was none more savage, none more relentless. Russ did not fight for glory or tactics. He fought because the Emperor told him to, and that was all he needed to know. But like all beasts, he had a flaw: impulsiveness, a wild, roaring instinct that no chain could fully tame. And that flaw was used against him. When the Emperor ordered Magnus the Red to be summoned and judged, it was Russ who was chosen to carry out the sentence. At first, he was sent to bring Magnus to heel, a leash, not a blade. But Horus whispered poison, twisted the order. And Russ, already filled with righteous fury and distrust of his sorceress brother, obeyed. What followed was not an arrest. It was the razing of Prospero, a city of knowledge reduced to ruin beneath the claws of the wolves. Thousands died. Scholars, warriors, innocents. The 1,000 suns were shattered, broken, driven into the arms of chaos. And the Imperium? Fractured, wounded, scarred. Russ had done what he was ordered, but not what was intended. And the galaxy would bleed for it. Even so, the Wolf King remained loyal, always. He would have died 1,000 deaths for the Emperor. But sometimes, loyalty, untempered by wisdom, is a weapon wielded by another. In the time of ending, Russ is gone, vanished into myth, Some say he hunts in the Eye of Terror, seeking redemption. Others believe he prepares for the final war. But one day, they say, the Wolf King will return, at the end of all things. And when he does, he will not come quietly. Rogal Dorn, the Praetorian of Terra. He was the rampart of the Imperium, the last bastion between the Emperor and annihilation. Where others charged forward into glory, he stood firm. Rogal Dorn, Primarch of the Imperial Fists, the Praetorian of Terra. To Dorn, war was not a contest of strength or fury. It was calculation, a slow grind, a matter of endurance. He did not seek acclaim. He did not crave praise. He built, he defended, and he obeyed. When the heresy came and Terra became the stage of apocalypse, it was Dorn who turned the imperial palace into a fortress. It was he who mapped every corridor, fortified every breach, measured every loss. He stood at the Emperor's side until the very end. But when it was over, when the traitors were broken, and the Emperor entombed upon the golden throne, Dorn was not victorious. He was shattered. His flaw was not weakness. It was rigidity. And in the aftermath, it became guilt. He had done everything right, and still the Imperium bled. And so Dorn sought atonement in the only way he knew how, through war. Unrelenting, unforgiving, unending. He led the Imperial Fists into the Iron Cage, a brutal siege war against the Iron Warriors, his eternal rivals. It was a campaign drenched in death, where defensive genius met siegecraft in a grinding slaughter of attrition and pride. The Iron Cage was not strategy. It was penance. His refusal to relent, his unyielding devotion to absolution, nearly destroyed his own legion. It was only with the intervention of Guilliman that the Fists were saved from annihilation. Rogal Dorn survived. For a time. He would later vanish in battle against the forces of chaos. Only a single skeletal hand was recovered, clutching his blade to the end. Whether dead or ascended, none can say for certain. But one truth remains. He was the wall that would not fall, not to betrayal, not to despair, not even to death. Konrad Curze, the Night Haunter. He was the Emperor's blade in the night. Judge, executioner, prophet. A child of stars, born in horror, and destined to become it. Konrad Curze, Primarch of the Night Lords, the Night Haunter. He was born on the corpse world of Nostramo, a city wrapped in shadow, soaked in crime, ruled by fear. There, he hunted the wicked, not with laws, but with terror. He was the punishment that came when no one else would. And it worked. For a time. When the Emperor found him, he was already a legend, a nightmare whispered about in alleys and among tyrants. Curze did not inspire his people. He terrified them into obedience. But the Night Haunter was cursed from the start. He saw the future. Prophetic visions haunted him, dreams of death, betrayal, ruin, and in them he saw not just the fall of his brothers. He saw his own hands dripping with blood. This was his power and his doom. His flaw was not cruelty. That came later. His flaw was fatalism. He believed the visions. He accepted them, and in doing so, he made them real. He became the monster he foresaw, because he thought he had no choice. When the heresy came, Curze didn't need to be seduced by chaos. He didn't join Horus out of loyalty. He joined because he saw it happening before it ever began. He became a weapon of despair, striking not for conquest, but for punishment. He waged war through fear. He broke worlds not to claim them, but to make them suffer. The Night Lords followed him, not out of respect, but out of terror. Even his own legion feared what their father had become. And when the war was lost, when brother turned on brother, and the galaxy burned, Curze did not flee. He waited, in the dark, knowing the end would come. And when the assassin struck, he let it happen. His death wasn't defiance. It was the end of a prophecy fulfilled. Because Konrad Curze didn't want to win. He just wanted to prove that everyone was as monstrous as he was. Sanguinius, the angel, the brightest star. He was the most beloved, the most beautiful, the one who inspired not fear, but hope. Sanguinius, Primarch of the Blood Angels, the angel, the brightest star. He walked not like a warlord, but like a saint, wreathed in wings of white, clad in gold, bearing a soul forged in sacrifice, loyalty, and light. He was a warrior and a poet, a leader and a healer, a shield and a sword. And to the Emperor, he was more than a son. He was a mirror of what mankind could become. But even stars burn, and even angels fall. Within Sanguinius beat a flaw, a shadow buried in his genetic code, the Black Rage, a premonition of doom passed down through every blood angel that followed. He saw visions of his own death, of a monstrous end. But he bore them with grace. He bore them because he must. And in the final hours of the Horus Heresy, that prophecy came for him. The Loyalists had reached the Traitor's throne. Terror was burning. The Emperor prepared to strike. But at the gate to damnation stood Horus. The War Master turned abomination. And Horus knew his brother. He knew Sanguinius would come. Alone. It was not strategy. It was sacrifice. Sanguinius faced Horus not because he believed he could win, but because he knew he must try. He knew he was the only one who could. The only one who would. He died aboard the vengeful spirit, broken by a monster that had once called him brother. But his death was not in vain. The Emperor saw what Horus had done, and in that moment he unleashed his wrath, ending Horus, but forever shattering his own divine form. Sanguinius's death ended a war and began a tragedy. In the centuries since, his name became legend, his image worshipped, his bloodline cursed. The Black Rage, his legacy, afflicting every blood angel who carries his genes. Even in death, Sanguinius flies. Through dreams, through memory, through every warrior who battles with madness in his name. He was the best of them, the most human, the most divine. The angel died, and the Imperium never recovered. Ferrus Manus, the Gorgon. He was strength incarnate, the blacksmith of death. A Primarch, not of soaring prophecy, but of steel and fire. Ferrus Manus, Primarch of the Iron Hands, the Gorgon of Medusa. Where others sought beauty, Ferrus sought purpose. He believed in action, not words. He built engines of war, weapons of unimaginable fury, armor that could outlast worlds. His hands, wreathed in living metal, were not a gift of the warp, but of his own will. He tamed the beast Acernoth, forged an empire on Medusa, and led his legion with a code of unyielding discipline. He taught that weakness was failure, that the flesh must be replaced, that only iron endures. But beneath that steel exterior burned a soul too rigid, too certain. Ferrus Manus' weakness was pride, not an ego, but in strength itself. He believed that if one stood strong enough, no force could break them. He believed his brothers would stand with him. He believed Fulgrim would never betray him. He was wrong. At Isfahan V, Ferrus led the Iron Hands into the heart of the Traitor rebellion. He believed they would crush the heresy with sheer might, blades clashing, righteousness burning. But the trap was already set. Fulgrim, once his closest friend, his brother-in-arms, had fallen. And Ferrus still walked toward him, sword in hand, ready to save what could not be saved. Ferrus Manus died, not in retreat, not in fear, but defiant. He stood face to face with betrayal and did not yield. And for that, he lost his head to a traitor's blade. His death was the first Primarch to fall, a spark that ignited the fires of vengeance across the galaxy. His legion never recovered. They hardened further, tore out weakness wherever they found it, even within themselves. And yet, the irony remained. For all his hatred of weakness, his greatest flaw was believing strength was enough. Ferrus Manus did not fall to corruption. He did not flee. He did not beg. He stood, and he broke. Angron, the Red Angel. He never stood a chance. He was born beneath the lash, raised on the screams of slaves, forged in the arena with blood-slicked chains and broken bones. Angron, Primarch of the World Eaters, the Red Angel. He was found on Nuceria, a world that fed its nobility with the agony of gladiators. There, the young Primarch rose, not by cruelty, but by defiance. He led a revolt of slaves, seeking freedom in a world built to keep him in chains. But salvation never came. The Emperor appeared at the final hour, not to fight beside him, but to teleport him away, to steal him from the battle that would have given his death meaning. Angron never forgave him. And worse still, the damage had already been done. His captors had implanted the butcher's nails into his brain, barbaric augmetics that fed on rage and drowned out thought. He couldn't stop the pain, couldn't hear anything but the nails' endless hunger for violence. Even as a Primarch, he was already a slave. His legion, the Warhounds, became the World Eaters. They followed his fury, implanted the nails into their own skulls. Astartes made into berserkers. Angron didn't lead them. He unleashed them. He wasn't a strategist. He wasn't a savior. He was a weapon. And when the Horus Heresy began, the dark gods didn't need to whisper. They didn't need to promise. All they had to do was point. Angron's hatred did the rest. He tore across the stars, a storm of flesh and iron, not for power, not for ambition, but because his soul could no longer do anything else. And when he died, he didn't stay dead. Chaos gave him a new form, a demon Primarch cast in fire and chains, a god of slaughter given form. Today, Angron still rages, not with purpose, not with thought, but with the endless fury of a soul that was never free. He is not the most cunning. He is not the most powerful. But in a galaxy built on pain, Angron is the one who screams the loudest. Roboute Guilliman, the avenging sun. In a galaxy drowning in blood, he sought order. In a brotherhood fractured by betrayal, he stood as its spine. A general, a governor, a god of administration and war. Roboute Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, the avenging sun. Born on Macragge, Guilliman rose not from war, but from structure. He rebuilt civilization with reason, logic, and law. He didn't just conquer worlds. He elevated them, educated them, integrated them. His gift was not just battle. It was empire. Where other legions brought thunder and flame, Guilliman brought supply lines, language systems, and efficient taxation. He turned the chaos of conquest into a machine of governance. Ultramar became the beating heart of a functioning society in an age of endless war. And yet, within that brilliance was a flaw. Guilliman believed in structure, in hierarchy, in rule of law. He thought that if the machine ran cleanly enough, the galaxy could be saved. But the Horus Heresy shattered that illusion. He returned too late to save Terra, too late to stop the fall. And in the aftermath, he became not just a Primarch, but a regent. The Imperium Secundus, his breakaway empire, was born not of ambition, but necessity. A desperate attempt to preserve light in a universe gone mad. But even there, his faith in systems failed him. After the heresy, Guilliman restructured the legions, authored the Codex Astartes, and laid the foundation for the Imperium's survival. But his empire, his dream, stagnated, choked by its own bureaucracy, paralyzed by its own caution, too perfect for a galaxy that had become anything but. And then, 10,000 years later, he woke, dragged back from stasis in an imperium he no longer recognized. An empire of blind worship, rot and ruin. A parody of everything he built. Guilliman walks now, not as a conqueror, but as a stranger in his own creation. He brings war to chaos. He reforges old alliances. But behind the eyes of the avenging sun is a man disillusioned. Order alone is not enough. Structure cannot save what no longer obeys. And Guilliman, the man who built a shining empire, now wages war in the ashes of its memory. Mortarion, the Death Lord. He came from a world of poison, a land where the air itself was death, and men were born to suffer. And he learned from the very first breath that if the universe could not be cleansed, it must be endured. Mortarion, Primarch of the Death Guard, the Death Lord. He was raised on Barbarous, a world wrapped in toxin and ruled by tyrants. Warlocks in armor that defied death. Overlords who laughed as men choked on their own breath. But Mortarion rose, climbing from the poisoned valleys with lungs that burned, a will that would not yield. He became a symbol of resistance, a wraith in the mist, slayer of the tyrants who once ruled above. He built his strength, not in triumph, but in suffering. When the Emperor found him, Mortarion was already broken, but standing. He accepted his place in the Great Crusade, forged the Death Guard into warriors who would never falter, never complain, never stop. But pride runs deep in the bones of those who survive alone. Mortarion's flaw was not ambition. It was pride in endurance. He hated weakness. He despised dependence. Even when the pain became unbearable, even as the warp clawed at his legion, as sickness bloomed in their lungs, he would not ask for help. Not from the Emperor, not from his brothers, not from anyone. So when the plague came and his sons began to die, he turned to the only power that offered something he could not give them: freedom. The Lord of Decay didn't tempt Mortarion with glory. He offered release, an end to pain, a stillness in the rot. Mortarion embraced it, not as a servant, but as a man too proud to admit he had been broken all along. He became a demon Primarch, a living vector of pestilence, a hollowed figure entombed in rust, bile, and despair. Where once he fought to purify the world, now he spreads its filth across the stars. And yet, even now, some say Mortarion hates the corruption within him, that the child of Barbarous still dreams of a world without poison. But the man he became, the Death Lord, no longer knows the difference between strength and rot. He endures, not because he believes, but because he cannot stop. Magnus the Red, the Crimson King. He was wisdom given flesh, a giant among gods, the mind that reached where no others dared, into the warp, into fate, into truth itself. Magnus the Red, Primarch of the Thousand Suns. The Crimson King, born with a soul of fire and a mind of stars, Magnus was no mere warlord. He was a sorcerer, a scholar, a seer who dared to understand the warp instead of fearing it. And his legion, the Thousand Suns, mirrored him, psychers, philosophers, seekers of forbidden knowledge. They didn't conquer for glory. They conquered for enlightenment. But in the Imperium of Man, knowledge is heresy. His flaw was not corruption. It was arrogance, a belief that his wisdom stood even above the Emperor's will. When the shadows of the Horus Heresy began to stir, Magnus saw it coming, a psychic vision, clear and horrifying. And so, in desperation, he reached out across the warp to warn his father. Not with words, but with sorcery. And in doing so, he shattered everything. The psychic blast ruptured the Emperor's secret project, the Webway, mankind's last hope to escape the claws of chaos. The Emperor did not praise Magnus. He condemned him. He sent Leman Russ, not to retrieve him, but to destroy him. Prospero, Magnus's shining jewel of knowledge, was burned to ash. His sons hunted, butchered, scattered. Magnus himself broke, body, mind, and soul. And in that moment of despair, Tzientch was waiting. The changer of ways offered Magnus the one thing he still longed for, understanding. And so the Crimson King fell, not in greed, not in lust, but in grief. He became a demon Primarch, a god of sorcery wrapped in madness and regret. A creature still searching for truth, still rewriting reality, yet haunted by the knowledge that he was the architect of his own ruin. He still claims it was all to save the Imperium, that he knew better, that if only they had listened. But hubris has its price, and Magnus the Red paid it with his sons, his world, and his soul. Horus Lopercal, the War Master, he was the first among equals, the mightiest of warriors, the son who stood closest to the Emperor's light and cast the longest shadow. Horus Lopercal, Primarch of the Luna Wolves, the War Master. He was chosen not for brute strength nor psychic might, but for loyalty, for charisma, for a soul that inspired men to follow him into the maw of annihilation and believe they would win. He led the Great Crusade at the Emperor's side. He conquered not with chains, but with vision. He made humanity believe it could rise. But inside, Horus burned a secret fire, one no father ever saw. Doubt. The burden of leadership weighed heavy. And when the Emperor withdrew, returning to Terra, cloaking his purpose in silence, Horus was left alone, confused, wounded, afraid of failing the father who had never failed him. That was all chaos needed. During the Davin campaign, Horus was wounded, his body failing, his soul exposed. And in that wound, the dark gods poured poison. They showed him visions, a future where he was cast aside, the Imperium ruled by tyrants, mankind shackled by divine hypocrisy. They whispered, "You were meant to lead, not obey." And Horus listened. He fell, not in an instant, but in layers. Doubt turned to pride, pride to anger, anger to revolution. He took up the mantle of rebellion, convinced himself it was for humanity. But beneath it all, he still wanted his father's love, and hated him for denying it. The galaxy burned in his name. Half his brothers fell with him. The Emperor's dream became a nightmare. And on the vengeful spirit, in the heart of the storm he created, Horus met his father one last time. The Emperor killed him, not with rage, but with sorrow. Because Horus Lopercal was more than a traitor. He was the Imperium's greatest tragedy. He was the War Master, the brightest sun, the god who fell, and the galaxy has never recovered. Lorgar Aurelian, the Urizen. He was not a conqueror. He was a preacher. He spoke not with fury, but with truth, or so he believed. Lorgar Aurelian, Primarch of the Word-Bearers. The Urizen, the first heretic. From the world of Kolchis, he brought the gift of faith. While others crushed resistance beneath boot and flame, Lorgar offered scripture, doctrine, unity through belief. And it worked. His worlds didn't just obey the Imperium, they worshipped it. They worshipped the Emperor. But the Emperor had not come to be a god. He came to build an empire of reason, and saw Lorgar's faith as weakness, superstition, heresy. And so, he made an example of it. Monarchia, Lorgar's shining city of devotion, was destroyed. His legion brought to their knees by Guilliman. And the Emperor himself stood over the wreckage and told Lorgar, "You are wrong. It wasn't anger that consumed Lorgar. It was heartbreak. All his life, he had searched for something greater, someone to serve, something divine to believe in. And when the Emperor shattered that belief, he went looking elsewhere, and the Chaos Gods answered. They offered Lorgar what he had always yearned for, truth, divinity, worship. And so he knelt, and rose again as their prophet. The Word-Bearers became the first traitors, spreading the seeds of heresy across the stars, even while their brothers still thought the Imperium stood whole. They corrupted. They whispered. They converted. And when the heresy finally came, it bore Lorgar's signature, the script of rebellion written in faith and fire. He never raised his voice. He didn't need to, because words were his weapons, and through them entire legions fell. Today, Lorgar remains hidden. He does not rage like Angron. He does not decay like Mortarion. He waits in meditation, in silence, in prayer, because he knows it was never about war. It was about belief. And in a galaxy where gods are real, Lorgar Aurelian is the one who made them holy. Vulkan the Eternal. In an age of monsters and demigods, one stood apart, not because he burned brighter, but because he chose not to. Vulkan, Primarch of the Salamanders, the Eternal. He was born on Nocturne, a world of volcanic fury, where beasts hunted men and survival was forged in fire. But even there, Vulkan was different. He did not conquer. He protected. The blacksmith Primarch, the father who carried children through firestorms, the warrior who never forgot, that his legion was made of men, not weapons. He was a perpetual, a being who could not die. Burn him, break him, tear him apart. He would return. And yet, it was not his immortality that made him strong. It was his kindness. Vulkan believed that war was not glory, but duty. That strength was not measured in death tolls, but in how many lives you saved. And in the grimdark of the 41st millennium, that is the most heretical belief of all. It was that mercy that Konrad Curze, the Night Haunter, could not abide. During the Great Crusade and into the Heresy, Vulkan and Curze clashed, philosophies at war. One believed in fear, the other in hope. And so Curze captured Vulkan, tortured him, killed him, over and over and over, to prove that mercy was weakness. But Vulkan would not break, no matter the pain, no matter the torment. He would not become a monster, even when buried in their jaws. That was his power, not the fire, not the hammer, not the regeneration, but the choice every time to be better. He returned to his sons, and they became what he was, protectors. The salamanders fight not just to win, but to shield the weak. And though Vulkan vanished, whether into myth or secrecy, his legacy remains. In a galaxy that worships death, Vulkan is the last proof that compassion is not cowardice, that a soul who will not yield, not to pain, not to vengeance, is the strongest of all. Corvus Corax, the Raven. He did not come with thunder. He did not shout like Russ or burn like Curze. He was the shadow in the corner of your eye, and the justice you never saw coming. Corvus Corax, Primarch of the Raven Guard, the Raven. Born on Lycaeus, a moon ruled by chains and silence, Corax grew amidst rebellion. He learned early that victory didn't come from brute strength. It came from patience, precision, and knowing exactly where to strike. When the Emperor came for him, Corax asked for one thing: freedom for his people, and he gave it, at a cost written in the blood of slavers. He was not cruel, but he never forgot. The Raven Guard mirrored their gene father. Elusive, tactical, efficient. Strike from the dark, then vanish. They didn't seek glory, only victory. But even shadows can be pierced. At Istvan V, during the Dropsite massacre, Corax led his legion into what he believed was a final blow against treachery. Instead, he found betrayal. The Raven Guard were butchered, ambushed by their own brothers. Only a fraction escaped. And Corax was never the same. Guilt clawed at him. How had he not seen it coming? What good was foresight if it couldn't save his sons? And so, he made a desperate choice. Using ancient forbidden genetic lore, Corax sought to rebuild his legion overnight, to create warriors stronger, faster, better. But what he made were monsters, warp-tainted giants, screaming, malformed echoes of his vision. He had wanted salvation. He created a nightmare. Racked by shame, Corax ended them all himself, one by one, not with fury, but with silence. And then he vanished. Into the shadows of the galaxy, he disappeared. Some say he wanders still, that he hunts traitors alone, that he seeks Curze even in death. Others believe he became one with the darkness. But the truth is simpler. He was never a monster, only a man who carried too much guilt, and not enough forgiveness. Alpahrius and Omegan, the Hydra. No one knows who they truly were. Some say they were one. Others, two. A mirror within a mirror, always watching itself. They are the question the galaxy forgot to ask. And they are the answer that should never be trusted. Alpahrius, Omegan, Primarchs of the Alpha Legion. The Hydra. They arrived last, found in secret, and raised apart from their brothers. The Imperium had already begun to fray when they took their place, not as conquerors, but as saboteurs, masters of deception. Ghosts in plasteel. They didn't fight battles. They unwound them from within. Even their own legion did not know which of the twins led them. Alpahrius was Omegan. Omegan was Alpahrius. Both and neither. You never knew who you followed. And that was the point. Their flaw was not arrogance, nor wrath, but a belief that chaos could be controlled, that the enemy could be used. Some claim the Alpha Legion turned traitor deliberately, that they joined Horus not out of devotion, but to fulfill a hidden plan, one in which the Imperium could only survive if it first shattered, if it was burned clean. Others say that chaos lied, fed them false visions of purpose, while slowly poisoning their ideals. Whichever truth is real, if any, one thing is certain. No one knows what the Alpha Legion truly believes. Not Guilliman, not the Inquisition, perhaps not even themselves. Today, they still operate in shadow, turning war zones into puzzles, undermining both Imperium and Traitor alike. Are they loyalists, heretics, or merely playing a game so vast no one remembers it began? Trust nothing. Suspect everything. And remember, for every head you cut off, 2 more remain. The forgotten and the purged. There were 20 suns, 20 stars, cast across the galaxy by a father who would become a god. But only 18 stand in the light. 2 are missing. 2 are forgotten. Their names have been scrubbed from the archives. Their symbols chiseled from stone. Even their brothers speak of them only in veiled glances, or not at all. The forgotten and the purged. One may have fallen too early. The other may have risen too high. Or perhaps both defied their father in ways even Horus could not. Some whisper that they discovered truths the Emperor feared. Others claim their legions were too unstable, too monstrous to be controlled. There are rumors of Xenos worship, of genetic blasphemy, of sins so great they had to be buried, not punished. Their legions are erased, their banners never raised, their battle honors denied by time and decree. And yet, in the warp, where all things leave echoes, they are not silent. Some say the Forgotten One still lives, wandering the galaxy alone. A lost son, seeking vengeance, or perhaps penance. Others say the Purged was never truly destroyed, only sealed. We may never know their truth. Perhaps that is mercy, or perhaps the day we remember them will be the day we fall again. And so they stood, 20 sons forged from divinity and madness, mighty beyond reason, broken beyond repair. They were meant to save humanity, to guide it through the stars. But they were never men. They were weapons. And weapons don't bring peace. They only delay the next war. Some still fight. Some rule in shadow. Some have vanished into myth, and others into monstrosity. Brother turned on brother. Father watched his empire drown in blood. And the dream, the golden dream, was swallowed by the very chaos they swore to resist. Their names are etched in legend, but their legacy is carved into corpse worlds, forgotten oaths, and burning stars. In the end, the Primarchs were never saviors. They were the first warning, a prelude, a prophecy. Because in the grim darkness of the far future, there is no redemption, no forgiveness, only war